Frank made several nominations for these awards this year, and that was part of the reason that we asked him to introduce this panel. I feel like he's been instrumental and a real pillar of the Quivira community since its inception, and I'm really grateful to him to have done that for us, so thank you. This is our 11th Annual Radical Center Awards, and I feel really privileged to sit on stage with all of these folks. And one of the things I really like about this group is that they're all really humble, and they're as nervous or more nervous than me about public speaking, and they all expressed a certain amount of reticence to sit up here, but I'm really grateful that they are, because they all have some amazing stories to tell. So we give 4 awards, and you'll notice we have more than 4 people up here. Several of our awards this year are going to groups of people for their work. We give the awards for in ranching, conservation, civil service, and research. And I will tell you who is winning each of these awards and why in a minute, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the awards myself. I actually wanted to read one sentence of why we give these awards. Each of these recipients has inspired us with his or her dedication to community, healthy lands, and the advancement of our movement through teaching, writing, research, service, hard effort, and good humor. And all of these folks definitely have those qualities. So, I'll start with civil service. There's a group of 3, these 3 guys here, Curtis, Chee, Ron Mortensen, Mark Willis, who are winning this award. These are, it is the award for civil service. And Frank nominated them specifically because of their work post-wildfire in Arizona. He writes, "This outstanding team of range professionals has continued to provide both direct and indirect management support to one of the most diverse sets of allotments in the Southwest, and possibly in the entire Forest Service. They bring a high level of skill and dedication to ranching and conservation, and all 3 men epitomize the Radical Center and help keep it grounded in the lives and the careers of the people who make good things happen on the land." So it's really exciting to give you guys that award for civil service. Once I've announced why each of these individuals or groups is receiving this award, then I'm going to ask them to talk a little bit about their own work, and then we're going to move into a conversation about how they view the Radical Center and practice it. So our next award, it is given to Ernie Atencio, who is also a really, he's been a pillar of the Quivira community and engaged with our coalition for a number of years. He's a native New Mexican, northern New Mexico, and Ernie has worked sort of across boundaries his entire career. He currently works for the National Parks Conservation Association, but has been involved in all manner of different land management and stewardship activities over the years. And it's an honor to give him this award because of his involvement in so many projects in northern New Mexico. For those of you who are from New Mexico, you understand how much dedication and commitment it takes to engage people in a land stewardship conservation, because it's never simple. And so, Ernie, we're giving you the award for conservation. Thanks for all of your work. Our award for ranching goes to Wink Crigler, who is a 3rd-generation rancher. She operates her family ranch, the X Diamond, located in the White Mountains of Arizona. And I think that Wink is probably somebody who has, in her entire life, sort of operated in the radical center. As a woman in ranching, I would like to acknowledge this fact. It makes her, how she was described in her nomination, as an out-of-the-box lady. And she has an incredible positivity, and is somebody who, as I understand her stories, is an amazing problem solver. And also sounds like somebody who doesn't often take no for an answer. And when a situation presents itself, uses that creative problem solving to not take no as an answer. And so I really appreciate that. So I'm happy to award you the Radical Center Award in Ranching. And our last award is the award for research, and we're awarding it to Rachel Gilker and Kathy Voth for their work with the online publication On Pasture. How many of you read On Pasture? Okay, that's not enough. You should all check it out. What I wrote to them in our nomination for them is that On Pasture is one of the best sources for scientifically accurate information on pasture-based livestock production. Their online magazine provides up-to-date, accessible, and relevant information to pasture-based livestock producers. And we, as the Quivira staff, really value their publication for the kinds of information that it provides to our entire community. Molly, our Land and Water Program Director, likes to describe how they both have no qualms taking to task any piece of research that won't hold water and any story that hasn't got the science right. And they care deeply about this, and they care deeply about the perceptions both of the science and of producers to the public. And so we're really grateful for their work to publish On Pasture. And the other thing I'd like to say about On Pasture and what they do with it is that they work really hard to take science and bring it down to the ground, to make it usable for producers. And that's critically important, because science for the sake of science isn't helping us rebuild our landscapes and be good stewards. So thank you both, and I'm happy to award you the Radical Center Award for Research. So what I'd like to do now is pass the mic and ask each of these folks to talk. So I want to just hear directly from each of you a little bit more about your work and your current work and your background. So we don't have to start and go down the line. We can, anybody who wants to go first can go first.
Is it already on? Yes, okay. Rachel and I started On Pasture together just over 4 years. It'll be 5 years in March of 2018. And we did it because what we were seeing when we went to a lot of these conferences was that there's a lot of really great science out there, but it's not being used because when scientists stand up, it's really hard to understand what they're saying. And then we also noticed that there's some, what we kind of refer to as snake oil, that it's really appealing. It's a very shiny object, and so people were spending their time and their money on those kinds of things and then not getting the results they had anticipated or needed to get. So we talked about it for a while and talked with a group of people and asked people if they'd be interested in this kind of publication, and all the answers were yes, someone should do this. So Rachel and I chose to do it, and we did it for free for 4 years. We're finally being paid thanks to a grant from the NRCS. It's a Conservation Innovation Grant. And we've learned a lot along the way about how to translate science And when we're supposed to talk about the Radical Center, we didn't really think of this as coming to the Radical Center. We thought of this as providing information that was really valuable to people so that people on both sides of the aisle, or all sides of from all directions of the world, could come together and say, oh, well, that's how it works. Well, what can we do with that? And how do we as a society use that information to make a positive difference to everyone and everything? So that's kind of what we've been doing. Did I miss something?
That's why it works.
That's why it works too, because people, we're working hard to build a community where people can sit down on their computers without being trolls and talk to each other about these things, and then share experiences and say, yeah, this really worked for me, or I tried that and it didn't work. And that's why we often, as Sarah said, will say, wait, this doesn't hold water. And you can say it does, but we're going to show you the science that says why it doesn't work. And if you have some science to show us that we're wrong, then that's okay. Let's talk about that more, because science isn't about being right, it's about finding what works from our perspective. So that's what we do. So,
can you give a little bit of a personal background too?
Well, I think I started kind of my land management career as a volunteer for the Bureau of Land Management. And it started out because I thought I was going to go to an Earth First demonstration. Because I don't even remember what the riot was going to be about, but it was something bad that the BLM was doing. And I didn't end up going, neither did all the Earth Firsters. But that put the BLM kind of on my radar. And after a while, I became a volunteer. I was one of the 2 head volunteers. We built Kokopelli's Trail, which is a 158-mile mountain bike trail from Grand Junction, Colorado to Moab, Utah. And the idea behind that was that it was a non-polluting kind of source of growing our economy for that particular area. We were in a bad time. So after doing that, they actually hired me to be a public information officer, and I really thought that my job was to help people understand what our job as stewards was and what all the bureaucracy was surrounding that, so that they could step in and tell us what they wanted us to do and work with us. So one of my first jobs was to put together a brochure that explained all of the benefits of public land ranching and the things that public land ranchers did for our public lands that were really good for us all. And then from there, kind of working with them. When the Secretary of the Interior wanted to come and talk about raising grazing fees, I kind of coordinated ranchers and helped them understand how to get how to get to speak and what kinds of things they might say that would help people understand what this meant to them. And as a result, the Secretary got with a whole bunch of ranchers and decided things weren't as bad as he had anticipated or thought, and it led to a whole new way of working together. So that's kind of my background. After that, I taught cows to eat weeds, so that's what I do. There you go.
You can talk.
We can bounce around a little bit. We can come back to you, Rachel.
My name's Wayne Crigler. I live on the same ranch that my grandfather and my great-grandfather, Apache County, Arizona, nearby Springerville. And I have the good fortune of working with Mark and Ron, and used to be Curtis, but he got sick of us and so he moved away. But at any rate, I lived and worked on the ranch all my life, but when my family passed away, it became my responsibility to maintain and protect the integrity of the landscape that my great-grandfather and my grandparents, and of course my mom and dad, had been on. I found out that things had changed a lot. Living and working on the ranch wasn't like it used to be. And of course, as everyone knows, when there's a state settlement, there are always changes in the landscape and operations and so on. And when it became my responsibility to try to keep the landscape intact and functional and the ranch sustainable, I found out that I just had to take on a new look on how ranches would be. And of course, in all my years, my dad always did all the work with the agencies. I rode and moved the cows and did those kinds of things. But in my new role, I found out that I had to branch out and learn how to do a lot of different things. And it's always been my heartfelt desire that the ranch would always stay intact because it's a beautiful landscape. But all people on the landscape know that once you start dividing up a functional landscape, pretty soon they become dysfunctional. The water's over here, the grass is over here, the fence is over here, all those kinds of things. And so it was my objective to figure out how I could keep it sustainable and intact the very best way I could keep it intact. And what really created my original awareness was that as I took on this responsibility, my first startling moment, I guess, was when I was told that I would have to fence off a little stream that was just a few feet wide for about 10 miles. And I was kind of stunned by this. And quite frankly, I guess my response to that was, well, I'll tell you what, I won't fence it and you won't graze it. And I had a couple of other words interspersed in there. So we went for about, I said, well, what we have to do is go out to gather the science that will tell us what do we really, really need to do. And with that, I became involved in trying to collect the real science that these girls are talking about. What would fencing do as opposed to not fencing? And did we really need to do it to begin with? With that, it brought me in close contact with the riparian service team. I always remember working with Sandy Wyman and some others. It brought me in close contact with working with a lot of people in the Forest Service and the University of Arizona and lots of other people. And out of that, first of all, what we really discovered after 4 years of non-use and non-fencing, what we really discovered is that there were a lot of alternatives to putting up a fence. And with just a management plan, we could have great successes. And but as an offshoot or a part of that, it became obvious that one of the things that we could do as a result of this was to bring people together to help more than just me understand what my dilemma was. We could bring a lot of people across the landscape together. And so from that grew a thing called the RHA, the Ranching Heritage Alliance. It's a group with no charter. We don't charge any dues. We don't have any real membership roster, although we have a mailing list to send out notices of things that we do. And the real objective of that was to bring people together to collect and understand real science, empirical information that could be put back on the landscape so that we didn't have the conflicts and the issues that we had that just sprang up right away after I took over the ranch. And so for about 15 years, we've kept the Ranching Heritage Alliance alive, and I have to say we've had great participation, and we've brought in much science, we've collected much data across our landscape, and it's been a great success there. And thanks to these guys sitting here, they deserve this award, because if you just call them up and say, we need to go do something, they're always there to help us go out and collect information. So I guess that's kind of how I got involved in this radical center, because I am kind of a radical and a redneck. When I talk about thinking out of the box, I was told that I never even got close to the box. With that, I'd just like to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here today, and share the stories that everybody up here has to share with you. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's really a privilege to be up here with this amazing group of people. So thanks to the Quivira Coalition. Again, my name is Ernie Atencio, and I came to this. Everybody's got great stories about how they got involved in their work these days, right? I came to this work through, I think, a very circuitous backdoor kind of a route. My family's originally from northern New Mexico, from a little village called Dixon, that's just up north of Espanola. And we've been up there, like a lot of families, for many, many generations, since the 1600s. And but I grew up in the first generation that was displaced from the village agricultural life, and we moved to Denver. So I was sort of a first generation mainstream American. We didn't learn Spanish. We were sort of mainstreamed in American culture. And I grew up in the inner city. When after I finally graduated high school, after dropping out a couple of times, spending time in juvenile hall and other adventures, I had an opportunity for an outward bound trip. It was a scholarship program for inner city punks like me. We called it Hoods in the Woods. And it was just the most amazing experience I ever had. So I spent 3 weeks on this wilderness program and learned to hike and climb and mountaineer and just learning to love the outdoors. And from that, I made my escape, and I ended up working around the West as an outdoor instructor and guide. I worked as a park ranger for many years. Worked as a journalist on and off, wrote a lot for High Country News. And then when I was in graduate school, I was doing my graduate field work on the other side of the planet. I was in a place called Ladakh, India. It's on the Tibetan Plateau, north of the Himalayas, a wild place. And they have an irrigation tradition there that is just like the acequia system some of you may be familiar with in northern New Mexico. And it transported me back to my homeland. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? So that was my sort of inspiration to move back to northern New Mexico. And I've been here doing a variety of conservation work for the last 20 plus years. Mostly, I ran the Taos Land Trust for many years, and I served on the board of the Quivira Coalition for even more years. For a long time. I think I was here longer than anybody except for Frank, which was really a privilege and a lot of fun. And currently, my work today is as New Mexico Program Manager for National Parks Conservation Association. And I think we'll have an opportunity to talk more about how we use the Radical Center in our work. But that's my story.
Thanks, Ernie.
I'm Mark Willis, and I work for the Forest Service, and you can get your size out now. You know how this works is someone told me to tell Wink that she needed a fence that riparian area. And so I was the recipient of those words, and then also working through some great solutions, and I find great satisfaction in my job. What I really enjoy most about my job is people like Wink and many other great permittees that I've had a privilege to meet in my career, and get past some difficult hurdles and try to get past some of the silly things that we do, and try to keep families in rural communities and keep their way of life and going, because their way of life really is my way of life. I grew up in a small town in Heber, Arizona, on the Mokihan Rim that had a ranching and timber based economy, and so I have a strong connection, and I feel like I can serve those communities best in the position that I'm able to work in, and it's been a great privilege to me. I've known of the Quivira and the Radical Center for most of my career. I started my career in Douglas, Arizona, down on the Coronado, with that connection with the Borderland, the Malpai Borderland group, and that has influenced so much of what the Quivira is about. So it's a great privilege. I appreciate the honor in being nominated and given this award. And I'll let these other guys tell you who they are.
Mortensen, also a rangeland management specialist with the Forest Service. I wanted to say thanks to Frank for nominating us and for the Quivira Coalition for recognizing us. I don't really feel like we do anything special, but it's nice to be recognized for the things that we try to do every day. And I'm honored to be up here with these folks. I can't say that I knew them beforehand, but I have studied them a little bit since I've got to know that we're being recognized together, and great people, honored to be recognized with you. And I think the greatest compliment that I can pay to Wink, being one of our permittees, and I tell this to everybody, says if every permittee was like Wink, the Forest Service wouldn't need guys like me. She just does an excellent job and very deserving of this award. So, I grew up on a small family farm here in southern New Mexico, verdant and animus. And about the time that I was in high school, the family farm was kind of sold off. Kind of forcing me to go to school, and while I was going to college, I spent my summers with the Forest Service there in the Coronado, and I think it was at that time that I was exposed to the conflicts at that time in the early 90s around public land grazing and other public land uses. And for some crazy reason, I just had the thought that I could make a difference there, that I could jump in the middle of this and find some happy medium that would work for folks on a sustainable basis. And so decided to go to school and pursue a degree in rangeland management. Went to New Mexico State. As part of that, I also did an internship on Deseret land and cattle down outside of Orlando, Florida. And upon graduating from New Mexico State, I worked on the Gila for a little while as a rangeland management specialist. Also worked on the Dixie National Forest in southern Utah before coming here to the Apache Sitgraves National Forest. So people ask me, what do I do? My easy answer for them is that I administer livestock grazing on the National Forest in a couple of districts. But really what we do is we build and maintain good working relationships with the permittees and the other users of the land, and then work with them to manage and use that land on our nation's rangelands on a sustainable basis.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chee, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been involved with the work that we do. I also want to thank Ron and Mark and all the permittees and the different people who've been involved in mentoring me. I started out on the ABRS in 2009, and I didn't have a staff on Alpine, and my staff was in Springerville, and so it felt like right off the bat when I got into the agency, the wall of fire started, and so I just it was a very steep learning curve for me. So I just want to thank everybody who's been involved in mentoring me. So I'm from the Navajo Nation. I grew up in Toye, Arizona. My family had a small dry farm and cattle and sheep and horses, and so I felt that just going into range management was kind of my calling, and I fit right in with the people there and understand what the permittees and everybody's their goals are. So I kind of just fit right in there. So that's about it.
Thank you.
Hi. Just in brief, I worked with farmers in Maryland and in Vermont and throughout Northeast. And working with farmers in Maryland when I was studying for grad school, agronomy and soil science. I was working with these grazing farmers. They were pretty new to grazing in that area, so they were like the innovators. And basically, they told me that the least helpful thing when I asked was a university researcher. And then I went to conferences, and not particularly like this one, but there was this poster up on the wall, and it said that the take-home message was, and it was for farmers, this was like, take-home message. And the very bottom is saying, the probability of this is this based on the variability, and it spoke in science. And that's a different language than we speak. And so when Kathy and I came together after I had coordinated a pasture program in Vermont for half dozen, 2 kids worth of coordinating. So then I had the third one, and she and I were talking about this, and we're like, scientists don't speak the same language, and after working with farmers and scientists and seeing that there's just this huge gap in terms of what happens for research and what happens on the ground, and it needs to be applied for it to be useful, and it needs to be useful and based in science for it to actually be something that helps farmers and ranchers make money. And so with our from the west and from the east approach, we kind of came together and started on pasture, and I came to it after having all this fun with farmers in the Northeast, so represent the Northeast.
Thank you all so much for sharing your stories. It's really valuable. Because we are such a large group, I wanted to spend some time asking these folks to talk a little bit more and share specific stories about how they work in the Radical Center, but I'm going to shift gears a little bit instead. I'm going to ask that we all have a conversation. We have a few minutes for questions, so I wanted to open it up to all of you to ask questions of these folks about their work for a few minutes before we, and then once we've done that, I'm going to ask our new agrarian apprentices to actually come on the stage and give these folks their awards. So what questions do you have?
Over here on the left.
I've got a burning question. I think I know the answer. Did the fence get built?
No.
Other questions? Over here on the left.
I'd like to know what is the most fun part of your jobs, of your work?
I'll jump in there. I'd say my most fun part is similar to what Mark said earlier. It's building and developing these relationships with the permittees and getting to work with them and see them succeed on the ground, making their operation profitable and also making the resources that we manage sustainable, and just getting to see them succeed and being able to build those relationships and work with them. So it's the funnest part for me.
Let me jump in real quick on the fence. No, really, truly, that got us on the right track. That started this whole collaboration effort in our area. I think down on the Coronado, in that Borderlands group, they were a little farther along, and when I moved in 2006 up to that part of the world, I couldn't believe how the dysfunction between the agency and the ranchers. It would give me headaches for sure. Very, very difficult and adversarial, and that started us down a path that if we didn't have that foundation prior to the wall of fire, it would have been a complete disaster for the producers, for the cattle growers, that we had that foundation to work through that and had the skills and the communication and the relationships that we were able to survive something so difficult. And so it really is a thanks to Wink. And I guess all that participate in a really good community, a good relationship. I was just thinking about the factions divide and community unite, and there really is that. If we're working in this radical center that we've been talking about as that unity, if we're out here on these factions, nothing gets done. It destroys our effort.
I have to say, my current work with National Parks Conservation Association is like the best job in the world because I get to spend a lot of time in beautiful places, national parks and monuments all around New Mexico and the Southwest. So that's fun on a personal level. And I have to say, it's kind of fun also just causing a little trouble in a big national environmental organization, rattling their cage a little bit. We are developing a new statement and policy on environmental, social, and economic justice, which is not something an organization like NPCA has really addressed before. But I've written a policy for our Southwestern region. We're implementing that. We're taking it up to the national level of our organization. So that's part of what the Radical Center has taught me to do. Not to not stay in my lane, right? It doesn't work with every organization, I can guarantee that, but NPCA has been open to these new ideas.
Well, I don't know, it'd be hard to talk about what the most fun thing is, because when I get up every day, I just think it's going to be a good day, and look at all of the things that can be good, and go out and try to make it a difference. But I think of one thing that just kind of emulates, I guess, sort of the good times that we have is, I remember when Mark first came to our community and we were doing some monitoring work. I don't remember just how we got to that, but we were looking at some clumps of grass and stuff like that. He said something about going to work, and I said, yeah, it's something like we pay $1 a day or something like that for this work. Anyway, so every time we go out, we're always kind of joking about it. So I guess really the fun part of it is being able just to have do work, but make it fun in collecting important information to help manage and sustain the rangelands, and just to be able to do it in kind of in a pleasant and a jovial way. And they tease me about being in the box, and I have other things that I like to tease them about the $1 a day job and those kinds of things.
Aye.
Oh, we've got that too. Same.
Yeah, I think making a difference is definitely a highlight. Hearing from readers, and we had one woman who was left in a situation where she was on her own. Her husband left her with the ranch, and she'd just been the rancher's wife. But she wrote to us and said that basically reading on pasture got her through, and it gave me chills, and it still does. And hearing that kind of thing, it really rocks my world in a way I can't describe. That would probably be the most amazing thing, I guess.
And I really enjoy solving problems. So when readers write in with questions, I love being able to look up the information or find a person that can help them and get them exactly what they were looking for, and do it for free. Yeah, and I also really love going outside with people to their farms and ranches and looking at something on the ground and saying, oh, look at that, see how it works? And yeah, and I've heard a lot of that, like today, about, look, see how it works, now we can do something with that. So
yeah, learning the new thing is awesome.
Yeah, with people.
We have time for maybe one more question.
In the back.
Hi
there, I'm an educator, and I brought my students here today thanks to Sarah Winslow Fisher and Quivira Coalition, and we've come probably 8 or 9 years now. And this question is actually for Ernie. So I was so excited to hear your story, I have to say. Just this semester, I started the school year out with sustainability, and I showed my students learning from Ladakh. So when they heard that, they were like, oh, we know that story. And so the question is, in your experience, do you know what's happened in the time that this documentary was made to the Ladakh community? For those of you who don't know, Ladakh was heralded as one of the very most sustainable societies out there, living off the land, treating the land in a fashion that was giving back, so a very Buddhist integrity to the whole thing. And then towards the end of the documentary, you see that the whole system starts to collapse because of Western encroachment. And so I'm curious, do you know anything about how this society has thrived or not thrived in the time that this was made?
It's a great question, and I have not been back to Ladakh. I thought I would go back. I have not been back there since my field work in 1995. I worked with Helen and Norbert Hodge, who produced that film. This is a place that's completely isolated, snowed-in passes, 9-10 months out of the year. So it learned to be completely self-reliant economically and in terms of food production, and a very balanced sort of economy and culture and society. It was a beautiful model that I think we could all learn from. But as soon as they built roads and built an airstrip coming in, and they opened it to the outside world in the mid-70s, things definitely started going downhill. A friend of mine who did some field work there just a couple of years ago has said that I wouldn't recognize it now. The air pollution in that thin mountain air, 12,000 feet and higher, is really terrible from all the diesel trucks. Everybody's walking around on the street just like here with their devices and cell phones. Buddhist monks who are texting each other. It's hard to imagine. I'm sure there's still some pockets, some villages, some communities that are maintaining the old ways. And one thing that has happened as a result of Helena's work is that there has been a whole plethora of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, what we call nonprofits here, working on education, on agricultural sustainability, on alternative economic models. But it's a battle, right? It's that tradition that's 2,000 years old that's trying to hold on in the face of all this incursion coming from the outside and all these Western economic development schemes that just don't fit the local culture. So that's all I know.
Thanks, Ernie. Thank you, all of you, for sharing a little bit of your stories today, and it's a real honor to have you here. I know that all of you probably have more questions for these folks, and I encourage you to talk to them over the course of the rest of the conference and ask them more questions. What I'd like to do now, we're gonna see how much weight this stage can actually hold. We're gonna invite our new agrarian apprentices to come up and actually award the awards to these folks. As you get handed your award, if you could step to the front of the stage, we're gonna do a picture. So figure out who your award goes to. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you guys so much for your work. We're going to keep the apprentices up here for a minute if you guys want to step at off the stage.
All right, so again, my name is Monica Plus, and I'm the new agrarian program coordinator here at Quivira. And the apprentices did not necessarily know that they were going to be stuck up here on the stage.
It's a dirty trick.
It is. It's a very dirty trick. So these apprentices have been working on some of the ranches and farms and orchards that we partner with from New Mexico to California to Colorado. And for the last 8 months, they have been learning from these incredibly patient and experienced teachers. And they have learned a lot about doing, early morning calf checks. They have grafted more trees than they probably thought there were in the world. And they've really been investing a lot of their time and energy into learning to become the next generation of ranchers and farmers and land stewards. So we really wanted to take a moment to celebrate them. And this is actually their graduation. So I wanted to ask each of you to come up. I'll call out your name, and I have a diploma for you. So the first is Jesse Adcock. The next is Shauna Burhans. And I've been neglectful in one thing. Let me say that Jesse was an apprentice this year at Ranny Ranch in New Mexico. Shauna was an apprentice this year at Cobblestone Ranch in California. So next up is Reagan Elmore, who is an apprentice with Round River Resource Management in Colorado. Next up is Lucy Islin from the San Juan Ranch in Colorado. Next up is Paul Neubauer from the San Juan Ranch in Colorado, and this is Paul's second year as an apprentice. Next up is Kelsey Pizzera, who's up at Tully's Trees in Truchas, New Mexico. And then Garrett Sorber from Tully's Trees in Truchas, New Mexico, and it's also been Garrett's second year. And then Louie West from the James Ranch Artisan Cheese in Colorado. So please help me in congratulating the 2017 class of New Agrarian Program apprentices.